Welcome to this retrospective slash review for Shin Megami Tensei 4. I put quite a bit of time into this game, well over 100 hours for sure, and I just want to give a little bit of my thoughts on the game, and not only the game itself, but also emulating it via the Citra emulator, which is what I use for pretty much the entire video recording process of my playthrough. But also, I want to point something out real quick. While dealing with Citra, I used a program by the name of Checkpoint to take my save from Citra, move it over to my 3DS, and then I was able to take my save from the 3DS and bring it back over to Citra. So moving your save back and forth between the computer emulator and the 3DS is actually pretty easy to do, and it's something I definitely recommend. So all that having said here, I'm going to load my current save here, and I'm in the Naruku area. Just kind of have a little bit of some visual flair, as it were, and then you just pretty much talk about the game. So as far as this game is concerned, this is the first Shin Megami Tensei game I've ever played, and to be fair, I actually really enjoyed my time playing it. So it's a pretty good game. Definitely, there's plenty of channels on YouTube and whatnot that had recommended the Shin Megami Tensei series. Now, why did I choose this one as the first one I played? Well, I don't know. It was a mainline game, and to be fair, I think I probably flipped a coin or rolled some dice to decide which one of the 6 on 3DS I would play first. But at the end of the day, I think this is a good, first introduction to the game, and I actually think one of the things they talk about, I guess, is different about this game compared to other Shin Megami Tensei games is the whole quest system, and how the quest system is completely new or different, basically, here in this game. So, it may be new, but I enjoyed it. It worked well, and I bet it kept my attention, basically, and gave me something to, like a goal, basically, to achieve. So I appreciated that aspect. Now, as far as the game concerned, just talk about certain aspects of the game. Grinding, you're dealing with these JRPGs. A lot of times they have a very big grind factor to get levels and whatnot. And this game in particular is very, what I wouldn't say devious, but sneaky maybe, or there is a grind mechanic, but not in the typical fashion. And I think I actually stumbled across this online as a comment, and basically the grinding is hid behind the demon fusion system, and that's 100% correct, because basically with the demon fusion system, you're sitting there trying to get different demons so that you can, basically either get a better demon, or in my case, I just wanted to have a specific set of demons, and a fairly small set at that, to be honest. Okay, so yeah, I had a very small subset of demons that I was focusing on, from a specific mythology area, and even just focusing on that small area, the Americas and the British Isles, it took me hours and hours and hours just trying to find different demons, getting different fusion combinations. And I guess one of the things about this game, probably a word that is thrown around a lot for these types of games, I would assume, is they're very deep games. And that's true. They are very deep games. However, that's also kind of code word for you're going to need a guide. And that is 100% the case here. I definitely need a guide to help me out with just the demon fusion aspect of the game itself. There's so much involved there that I definitely needed that guide. Um, Now, as far as the actual quests themselves, you suck. This is what we call a revenge tour because I remember him being so hard. But anyway, uh, so basically, the demon fusion stuff was probably the most complicated aspect of this game, and that's one of the things I'll do in the comments to this video. Basically, um, I will put a bunch of links in there because there are so many links I had to use just to figure out all the different demon fusion combinations. In fact, one of the better sites I had to go to actually was a demon fusion calculator, just so you could figure out every single combination. And for some demons, it was absolutely insane how many combinations that there were. And I don't know. I mean, whoever came up with that calculator, bless you, because that was an insane amount of work to put that in for sure. And it's just, I don't know. It's just a huge amount of effort to get that for everybody. And now the actual quests themselves, majority of them weren't really too difficult to figure out. Um, Struck you down with the utmost respect. Anyway, they weren't too difficult to figure out, and I don't know. I think even the majority of demons, once you were able to get that, figure out what the weakness is, you could basically exploit everything. And I guess that's kind of both. It's a positive and a negative to a certain extent because it's definitely something. I mean, obviously, I could have looked online for guides and figured out what the weaknesses were for every boss before I even went into a boss fight with them. But that kind of would take a lot of challenge out of the game, and I didn't really want to do that. So I would try to figure out what the weaknesses were before going in for pretty much all of them. There might have been a couple I might have accidentally looked at and say, "Oh crap! Well, I guess I know what this weakness is now." But I didn't specifically go in there with the idea that I was going to sit there and figure out what the weaknesses were before getting involved in any of the fights with them. And for the most part, I didn't really need to. Like one demon I've got here, which I will affectionately call Beelzebubba, um, I stuck him in my DDS aspect so that I could transport him into my new game. And he was probably one of the more difficult fights I had to do, to be fair. Um, but even that wasn't really all that hard. In fact, the hardest aspect of this game is just getting used to the mechanics and how the game works. And early on, the difficulty can be pretty brutal. But if you kind of get stuck in a demon fusion loop like I did, you're going to sit there and level up to the point where you're pretty much over level for anything as far as the main game is concerned. Now, there's other certain aspects to this game that we that I haven't experienced yet. Uh, for instance, there's basically four total endings. I've only seen the nihilistic ending and the law ending, and so I know that basically I need to go out and play the game again on New Game Plus to try and actually get the other two endings. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. You see this save that I'm doing here. It's literally just me working on the chaos ending right now, and that's pretty cool. I mean, I do appreciate the whole New Game Plus idea, as it were, and the fact that they do give you a couple of options for New Game Plus. One of the things I will point out, there are basically two options when you finish a game. You can basically do a reincarnation restart where you basically start off with the same level that you are now. I think I was 89 at the time, actually. And you can take over one demon on the DDS. And you basically have all your app points, your money, your equipment, everything. And then there's the one that basically allows you to start over like completely fresh almost. It gives you, well, actually, I'll show you here in just a second. Oh, wow, that's great. Another Dex instance. That's if I needed more powerful improvements. Let's see here. But anyway, pull up the apps thing. So you keep your 4 skill expansions and the demon, not the demon skill 1 through 4. So if you had that in your previous game, it carries over to the next one. So I don't understand why anybody would really do the new life option, because you start over at level 1, and yes, you do have some of your app points, but you got to start all over again. The only thing that would actually make it tolerable, I guess, is if you had a really powerful demon in your DDS that you could take with you. And I don't know why you'd want to, except to get maybe a few extra app points. But as you see, I've already spent some of them. And that's another thing. Even when you start over on reincarnation restart, you get all your app points back. And you can actually redistribute your app points however you want. And so, with the exception of the ones that carry over, basically, because those are automatically unlocked. So I was never really hurting for app points in this game. And that does kind of bring me to another point I'd like to talk about, and that's the DLC. So the DLC for this game, there's a lot of it, basically. And 3 of the DLCs are there to basically give you more Maka, more app points, and more XP. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really hurting for any of that stuff throughout the entire game. So, and that's the thing is, if you look at the DLC costs more than the game itself. Now, granted, I got the game when it was, I think, like 75% off. So I paid a very small sum of money to get this game. But even at full price, the game is $20. The DLC costs more than $20. So if you do get the game now, you're spending a lot of money on DLC. And I don't know, it just, to me, I don't think the DLC is probably a good deal. There is some that does kind of expand in the story. That again is basically almost the equivalent in cost to the actual game itself. And I don't know if it warrants getting that extra DLC, to be honest with you. Because if you just spend any time trying to complete the Demon Fusion stuff, you're going to have money, app points, experience, everything coming out of your ears, basically. There are a lot of demons in this game, to be fair. And I think that's a very interesting aspect, is how they pull from pretty much just a whole bunch of different mythological sources. And it's really neat, basically, all the different ideas that they pull into the game. But at the end of the day, it's also a bit overwhelming how many options there are, because there's an insane amount of options. And I should change my bullets. Anyway, you know what? Check with y'all. So, so there's just an insane number of demons, and I'm kind of trying to make a list of some of the other demons for the different mythologies I haven't tried. And when I went down the main mainland European ones, I actually had the majority of those demons as well, because you have to have so many demons to fuse different things. And I don't know, it's one of those things is if you're trying to complete the demon compendium, you could just basically, I say tens of hours. I'm actually not over exaggerating. I don't know how many hours I spent just trying to do demon fusion aspects of the game. It was kind of ridiculous even, and it made me really overpowered, to be honest with you. Like, I got to Lucifer, and well, he was a punk. I beat him in the first time I played him. He wasn't even a challenge. Um, he just died like a little, you know what. and and I don't know. I mean, now to be fair, the law ending itself is not the quote unquote true ending. The true ending is the neutral ending, and that's one aspect of the game I think I would like to criticize, is the fact that it is so hard to get to the neutral ending. And I felt like, me personally, I did some stuff that was chaotic. I did more stuff that was lawful, obviously. But I thought, personally, I was closer to the middle. But this game, they put that neutrality thing in such a very narrow window. There's like this scale basically from negative 100, which is chaos, to 100, which is law. And you've got to keep it between negative 8 and positive 8 to get the neutral ending, which is really hard to do. Um, Not only that, but because I started playing this over again, I realized there's a lot of stuff that is not explained in the law ending. Like, for instance, the guy in the wheelchair, Steven, and the little girl, what happened to them? I don't know. There's no mention of them or anything in the law ending that I can remember off the top of my head. It's just like that whole plot thread completely and totally disappears. And now that I'm, doing the chaos playthrough now, I'm pretty sure it's not going to get answered on the chaos playthrough either. So the only way you can do it is I'm going to have to sit down and I'm going to have to map out every single choice I make so that I end up in that very small window to get the neutral ending. And that's to a point where it's like, if I need something like that, I have to have a guide to get certain choices like that. I don't know, that does deduct some points, in my opinion, on the game because it is so hard to get that neutral ending. And it shouldn't be that difficult. And that's probably one of the biggest downsides to the game. Like I said, the weakness aspect is probably more of a problem for you early on, because if you get jumped and they can exploit your weaknesses, they can wipe you out in one turn. But as the game gets moving along, it's not that big of a issue. Whereas early on, it's a big issue. I don't know. I kind of like the whole press turn system. I do like it. I don't know if I would say I like it better than traditional turn-based RPGs like the older Final Fantasies, Dragon Quest, things of that nature. It's different though, and I enjoy both aspects, if that can be believed. Um, I don't dock it anything for that aspect. I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a plus. I don't think it's a minus. I think it just is what it is, basically. Um, Now, like I said, getting the neutral ending is probably the biggest thing I would dock it for, and maybe a slight docking for the amount of demons and how much time and effort you've got to go through just to get them, because it's kind of insane. And I guess one of the worst aspects of the demon fusion is you can get locked out of some paths to get certain demons, because if you get locked out of certain areas, you can't go back and access those demons. So either you have to spend money on the demons, or you have to come up with a different method of fusing to get up to where you need to be. And, definitely on the law route, that was very apparent because we lost access to Infernal Tokyo and Blasted Tokyo. They were never anything we could go back to. So, I mean, that's definitely one negative. I mean, I like that there's so many options, but at the same time, there may be too many options as well. Other than that, let me see. I do want to talk about the music in this game because it was freaking amazing. The music was just great in this game, especially the boss battle music. Some of the boss battle themes were just they were they were just spot on, amazing, really. And I can't say enough about how great the music was in this game. In fact, I liked it so much I went onto YouTube Music and I tried to find a playlist basically that had all the music in the game, and I looked up some of the information about the game, and there was a soundtrack that came out, I guess, most likely in Japan, like most things, and it was 4 CDs worth of music. So not only is the music really good, but it's extremely varied, and there's so many different tracks, and the different tracks were just about anything you could possibly think of. So that's actually pretty amazing, really, to have that level of quality in your music and that high level of variety as well. I mean, easily, I think the music in this game is the biggest plus for sure. It's just amazing. I do want to talk a little bit about the emulation aspect as well. And I did play this using the Citra emulator, but I also played it starting out on Windows, but I also used it on Linux. So I played using the emulator on both operating systems. And to be fair, it was pretty much consistent across both OSs. So depending on what operating system you're running, you should get a good experience from that perspective. But I will say that it was there was a couple of times under Linux my X server did get locked up when the emulation was going and I had to reboot the computer. Not a huge deal because man, you're talking about over 100 hours of playing. Now I probably play close to 75 or so of that on Linux, give or take. So that's not a huge number, really, but it's something to keep in mind. I think the Linux emulator is not quite as good as the Windows, but it's very negligible, the difference there. And as far as the emulator itself is concerned, I think it does a very good job of emulating the game. Now, when I was through my playthrough, you could probably hear every now and then a bit of a lag when it was trying to load an area, and you'd hear the music kind of lag a little bit, and then it would basically pick back up again. But that wasn't to a point where it was, I guess, annoying would be the best word. For instance, like for me, trying to play something like Super Mario 3D Land, where it sounds like it's bubbling or something like the music just isn't in sync with the game, and it's very noticeable, and it hurts the experience to the point where you just don't want to play it. But this game is also one where the 3D effect on the 3DS is nice, but not having the 3D effect isn't something that is going to affect you. Whereas in something like Super Mario 3D Land, not having the 3D effect in a lot of levels there is it's a big hindrance. But I didn't I enjoyed seeing the 3D effect on the 3DS, but I could live without it. And one of the things about the emulator, I will definitely say this is it the control is much better using the emulator because I can customize my controls on my controller. So I have my L and my R mapped to my right stick, and that made all the difference in the world as far as moving around and controlling the game. I thought it was much more enjoyable to play it via the emulator on that point. Now, another thing I'm going to give you a link to is I'm going to give you a link to the um, high definition pack that I used in this game. I think I probably did in like the very first video I put out, but I'll go ahead and give it to you again just to make sure that you all have that link, especially if you didn't want to watch playthrough, you just want to see the retrospective. But the high definition texture pack, it's pretty much a must, I feel, for the emulator, um, because without it, the game is very blurry, especially the text. The text is very hard to read without the HD texture pack. So 100% recommend getting that and using it if you're going to emulate this via Citra. Um, it's not noticeable on the 3DS itself, but when you're playing it via the emulator, it's extremely noticeable and definitely something I would recommend against doing. Now, another aspect of playing this on the 3DS is if you've noticed, well, if you go back to my playthrough or even just this video, you would see when you would beat a demon and there'd be a big black box around that demon as they're dying or they're blowing up or whatever. You don't see that on the 3DS, and that's probably the biggest graphical shortcoming of the emulator. That is fair, it's noticeable, but it's not something that I think detracts to the point where you don't want to play the game via the emulator. At this point, I would say from an emulation perspective, it's not perfect. I'm trying to think what they have a different levels on their website, and I think it lists this game as being okay, but I would say the actual emulation levels probably close to great because those minor artifacts they're just that they're minor. You combine that with the fact that you have better controls via the emulator, and I think that this is something I could recommend to people. I could actually recommend playing it via Citra over the 3DS. Now the 3DS isn't bad, but I just liked playing it better on the emulator. So that's definitely something to consider in the future. And if you have your 3DS hacked, you can dump the game and dump the DLC. And I only used the free DLC, which did help out early on, but that's the only DLC I used. Um, Definitely, I would recommend playing it via the emulator. I think it'd probably be a better experience technically. Other thoughts than that, I think that's pretty much about it, really. I don't think I've forgot anything. But overall, I'd say this game, I don't know, it wasn't as bad as, say, some of the Bethesda games where you kind of get lost on a rabbit trail and you're sitting there doing so many side quests you just lose interest in the game. But the amount of demon fusions did get to the point where I was like, okay, I just kind of want to finish the game at this point. So not to a Bethesda game extreme, but it does get to a point for me personally where it was probably too much. And the other thing is, if you're trying to complete that demon compendium, there's these extra harder bosses in the game that are harder than the end game bosses, and they're really hard to find. Like you have a 1 in 256 percent chance of seeing them pop up in certain areas, and I don't even know how people freaking learned about this stuff back in the day to actually document it. But that's another one of those things is like this game is so guide heavy. You need guides to do so much in the game, not to basically do the actual main game itself. Though I did have to access the guide here and there just to kind of figure out what was going on. But for you to be able to get the neutral ending, to know anything about Demon Fusion, beyond what they just show you in the default app, you're going to need guides and lots of them to figure things out. And that definitely does detract, in my mind. That's the biggest attraction, really, is how guide heavy it is, and that's pretty much my biggest gripe with it. So, but at the end of the day, I did enjoy myself. It was a good time, and I am going to do the new game plus stuff. And every now and then I'll come back to this game, and I'll do a video. Actually, let me get out here real quick. Do a video and show like some extra quests, because there's extra quests on new game plus that aren't there during the main game. So I will come back and try to show some of the quests, probably not all of them, because like there was one quest I just did right here. Yeah, there was a berserker and a rakshasa in the in Naruto, and you had to go down there and kill them. Well, me being level 91 and having Beelzebub with me, we kind of took care of them like they weren't that big a deal. And so there are a few new game plus quests. No, actually, there's probably more than just a few. There are more quests and whatnot to do to kind of incentivize you to play the new game plus, in addition to getting those other endings that you didn't get the first time. So I will do that. I will come back and post, differences and whatnot, or like when the chaos path truly is very different from the law path, then I'll actually start posting that stuff on here. But I'm not going to sit here and focus so much on trying to get to all that stuff. So I'll probably play it nonchalantly here and there, because there are other games I want to play and do playthroughs for. But in the meantime, that is something, if you want to see the chaos path and the neutral path, I am going to try to post that eventually. I just don't know when. But anyway, I don't think I ever said what my overall score of the game would be. So I think overall, I'm going to give it an 85%, because I think that's a good score. It's definitely not a perfect game, but there's a lot of positives to it. I mean, it's very close to a 90% actually. Um, so I don't know, maybe 88%, 89%. It's definitely right there on that scale, in my opinion. It's not a perfect game, and there's just you spend way too much time grinding, doing demon fusions in this game, and that does get tiring after a while. But other than that, it's a good story. The story is actually pretty good. Actually, I felt like the law ending was a little bit depressing to a certain extent. That being said, um, it's a very good mature story, and I never could get into stuff like Pokemon, but this for me is a better game than Pokemon because of the more mature storyline, the fact that you're actually fighting with your demons, not having to do all the fighting for you. So this is something that's definitely more up my alley than say Pokemon. But if you're a fan of Pokemon, you'd probably enjoy this game too. Um, and you're probably already one of these people that doesn't mind spending 100, 200 hours catching them all or whatnot. But that's just not something that I think I'm going to really strive to do. Like all those fiends and whatnot that have the really low spawn rate, I'm probably not even going to try to get them, to be honest with you, because I don't think I got the patience for that. Other than that, it's a good game. Definitely recommend it to you all. Um, yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.